Yo, what is up guys, Ghost here. Welcome back to another video. In this one, I want to touch on the subject of the class system for the upcoming Battlefield game, and exactly what we want to see from that game. I know a lot of you will probably say, well Ghost, it's probably coming out this year mate, you're a bit late to the party, but in actuality, I think the class system, which gadgets and weapons are available to what classes, is most likely one of the easiest things for DICE and EA to iterate upon and swap around. I don't know much about programming, but I'm assuming it's just kind of a more complicated version of ticking and unticking boxes saying, okay, this class can use this gadget or weapon and that class can't. And I'm pretty sure this is going to be one of the main things we will be iterating on in the Battlefield Labs testing. But we're going to go over a few different Battlefield games here and see which one did it best and which version, if any, should be coming to Battlefield 6 in 2025 or maybe 2026 if it ends up being a bit late. Guys, as always, if you enjoy the content here on the channel, hit the sub button. There's going to be plenty more to come from me over the next year on the new game. I'll be covering all of the news, so if you want to keep up to date with all of that, make sure you are subscribed. And as always, yeah, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate the support from you guys recently. It really does mean a lot to me, so thank you guys so much for that. So BenMC25 over on Reddit actually just happened to post some really handy graphics of the differences between the class systems in a few of the latest Battlefield games. And I believe that the best approach to the new game is to take inspiration from a number of these. So first of all here, we have Battlefield Bad Company 2. So in this game, you had a class primary, as we've seen in most Battlefield games. You also have a universal secondary. Now, the first gadget for each class was directly tied to your class, and I actually really like the way they spread them out here. So they gave ammo to the assault player, medkit to the medic. Obviously, the engineer got the repair tool, and then the recon got the motion sensor. Doesn't necessarily have to be the motion sensor, I don't think. But the main one here that I really liked is that they gave the ammo to the assault class and not to the support class. One thing we saw happen in Battlefield 3 and 4 is that the assault class got access to both the heals, like the medkits, and also the defibs so that they could revive people. And at that point, you're pretty much just a one-man show. That really encourages you to run off on your own. You don't really have to do a lot of teamwork. You're going to be pushing the front lines, reviving people, healing people, getting all of the points. The support class in those two games, to me, felt a little bit lackluster. And then also in Bad Company 2, for the second class gadget, the assault class will get the grenade launcher or the C4, which I do like that being on the assault class there. Medic got the defibs, the engineer got launchers or mines, and then the recon got C4 or mortar strike. So the engineer, I don't believe, actually had access to C4 at all, which I think is a crying shame. I think it should actually have access to the C4 because, let's face it, it is the engineer class. And then for the perk system in that game, you could pick, I believe, a number of different perks here on your character, like more bullet damage, more rockets, carrying capacity, etc. And then there was also some universal and class ones. Now, Battlefield 4, and we're going to kind of skip over BF3 because these were much the same, like pretty similar, at least in terms of gadgets here. So once again, each class had a primary category of weapon. I do think this is the way to go. I like this much better than having everything available to all of the classes the way we currently have it in Battlefield 2042, and I think it really just drives each class into a specific role. But I also really liked which classes got which weapons, with a couple of exceptions that I'm going to mention in a second. So in Battlefield 4, the engineers actually got the PDWs they were called, but basically it's the SMGs. And as we all know from playing shooters, SMGs tend to be one of, if not the best category of weapons in the game. So I think giving that to a class like the medic, who already has heals, already has, revives, defibrillators, that sort of stuff, it seems like almost too good of a class. The assault class, again, giving them the PDW seems overkill when they already have the assault rifles. So I thought giving them to the engineers made people pick NGs a little bit more than they otherwise would have, and allowed the engineers to fulfill a slightly more aggressive role when it came to anti-infantry. So the assault class, of course, got the assault rifles, the support class got the LMGs, and the recons got the sniper rifles. But there were two categories of weapons that were available to all of the classes, and those were the carbines and the shotguns. And what this meant is that you weren't completely locked into a solid role for any class there. If you wanted to play Recon and you wanted to do a more aggressive build with C4 or something like that, you could take a Carbine as Recon. If you were playing as the Engineer and you wanted something a little bit more long range than an SMG, again, you could take a Carbine. And these weren't maybe quite as good as the Assault Rifles, but pretty close behind. So I really like the restriction there of the weapons in Battlefield 4. One thing I would like to see change though with the gadgets in that game is to actually switch around who gets the ammo and who gets the heals. So like I said, with Battlefield 3 and 4, the Assault class were just like a one-man band. They kind of went off on their own, did whatever they wanted, right, because they've got the heals, they've got the defibs. I think there should be a, whether we call it support class or medic class, that gets the heals and the defibs, and the Assault class, I think, should actually get the ammo boxes, so they can be throwing down ammo on the front lines. And let's face it, they're really the class that need the ammo. But at the same time, they can't be too overly aggressive, pushing up onto those objectives and just completely hand-wave the support of, well, the support class because they just didn't need it. If they've got the ammo crates instead, they're definitely going to have to sort of, you know, play ball with the support class or the medics. Now, I will say this, the field upgrades in Battlefield 4 left a lot to be desired. So basically, you could pick a perk for your field upgrade, and once your squad accrued a certain amount of points, I think it was, you would unlock these field upgrades one by one. A lot of squads ended up picking, unfortunately, the same field upgrades, and so they didn't really stack together. So if you had the same field upgrade as somebody else in your squad, it was kind of a waste. People just didn't really pay attention to them, how many points they were getting, what buffs they were getting from these field upgrades, and I think a lot of people just kind of went with the same ones in some sort of a, you know, set it and forget it mindset. And they just kind of faded away. Nobody really cared about them or even noticed them. So I definitely think they need to rework that there. Now, another interesting thing about Battlefield 4's class design is that it didn't actually properly lock you into any like specific class gadgets. So if you're playing an Engineer, you had to actually equip the repair torch. If you were playing as the Assault player, you had to equip the defibs, right? Those didn't just come as an integral, inherent part of the class setup. You had to decide to choose those, so you could, if you wanted to, run an Assault class that had no heals and no way of reviving anybody either. But you know what happened? Most people ran the defibs anyway. They just naturally gravitated to playing that role, and they usually went with a medic box there or a medic pouch as well, because I think DICE pretty much just made those the most lucrative options. But at the same time, it was nice to have the option to do something else, so I really do like that fluidity there to the class system and the gadgets that you can pick. Now, moving into Battlefield 5, the medic class actually got the SMGs in this game, so they've now moved away from the engineers and onto the medic, which really pushed that class to be a much more aggressive, upfront and personal, sort of like more what the Assault class was in Battlefield 4. And then the Assault class in that game actually became more of a, like, sort of an engineer. It got way more explosives there. They lost the healing ability, I believe. They couldn't do that, and were really, you know, the anti-tank busters. I was personally not as big of a fan of that. I felt like the lines between the Assault class and the Engineer got too blurred. You know, I'm all for the Assault class having some explosive, maybe access to the C4, but they already get just such a good kit to start with anyway, and we see such an overrepresentation of Assault players and medic or support players, whoever has the heals basically, in comparison to Engineers and Recons, and it's just because they're better classes in general. So I don't really think they need too many explosives, but yes, there should be some sort of an explosive option. And then, of course, moving into the current era of Battlefield 2042, we have universal primaries and attachments across all of the classes. I'm not sure if this is the route that DICE wanted to go down, because for those of you unaware, they actually completely overhauled the class system in Battlefield 2042. There were no classes to begin with. You could have any weapon on all of the specialists. You could have any of the gadgets on all of the specialists, so you could be running around with what is essentially an assault specialist like McKay whilst using an M5 recoilless launcher. And so when they introduced the class system, they only put the gadgets in that class system and not any of the primary weapons, because they didn't want to mess with what players were already used to. Are they going to do that again for the next game in hindsight, after seeing that some players liked this in Battlefield 2042 and others didn't? Personally, for me, I hope not. I really do think that Battlefield 4 hit the nail on the head. Most of the weapons were restricted behind classes, but each class got a really solid category of weapon to go at, and then there were a couple of categories that were universal. Again, they're the carbines and the shotguns. Now, obviously, we also had specialists in 2042, so you have one gadget that is tied to that specific specialist, and then you had a class gadget that you could pick within that class. So since we know there are going to be no specialists and we're going back to a regular class system in the next game, I can only assume that we're going to have a little bit more of a choice when it comes to both of those gadget slots now, instead of just the one of them. All in all, I just think Battlefield 4 did a tremendous job of enforcing the class roles while still offering a nice amount of customization and variety for the player. As for what I think we're going to see, if I had to guess, I would say we're definitely going to see the medic class rather than the support class. The support class has been probably the weakest class in Battlefield in general. I mean, even if it gets access to C4, it's still just been the worst, right? So I think changing that into the medic class was the way to go. I think they realized that having the heals and the defibs on the assault class wasn't really working out, or it was just making the assault class way too overpowered, and so they switched it up there, changed the crappy support class into a medic class, and gave the heals to that. But again, I would like to see the support class, even though that is their role, move the ammo boxes and the ammo in general from that class to the assault class. When it comes to the LMGs, I think they should go on the medic class. I think SMGs on the medic, again, it's sort of like the same thing with the assault class in BF3 and 4. It just makes too good of a class choice there. It's arguably the best choice in Battlefield 2042 at the moment. It's the best choice in Delta Force as well. So giving them the LMGs would actually make people maybe use those weapons, and then, like I say, you can have some sort of universal weapon category like the carbine, so if you don't want to use an LMG, you do have that option there, but then give the PDWs or the SMGs to the engineer class to make them a little bit more interesting, maybe even the recons as well. The assault class, of course, are going to have the assault rifles, which are just always good, but then you'd also have a recon class that doesn't just have to dedicate itself to sitting back and sniping. You've got a few different aggressive options there as well. So I'd love to hear what you guys all have to say about this. You know, what do you reckon to this class system? What is the best template to follow if we're gonna follow one from any Battlefield game, or should we just change things up completely and do away with the class system that we know and make something brand new? Specifically, what do you think about limiting weapons to classes the way it's always been in Battlefield, or do you like what they've done in Battlefield 2042, and now that you've gotten a taste of it, would you rather that things don't go back to the way they were before? Let me know below, guys. Leave your comments down there. As always, if you enjoyed today's video, leave a like down below. It really helps out a lot with the algorithm. Subscribe for more Battlefield, and I will see you guys in the next one.